Welcome to the 30/30 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Guillermo Ruiz.
Hello everyone, I have a super show for you today. My guests are Tara Garrison and Craig Preisendorf. Tara is a full-time keto coach and trainer. Craig is a strength and nutrition coach. They work together as the superhero makers to help clients achieve mental clarity, fat loss, and muscle gain. Also, I'm flying to Seattle for one of my favorite conferences, the Ancestral Health Symposium. If you're attending the conference and you see me around, stop by and say hello. I love meeting my listeners. And remember to visit my website, 3030strong.com, for updates on my upcoming adventures. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Super excited to have Craig and Tara on the show today. You know, it's like amazing. We met about a year ago at the Bulletproof conference.
A year, yeah.
And because my schedule is so insane, and, you know, imagine Craig's, you know, we haven't been able to connect, and we've been talking about doing this interview for a year. So it finally, the stars align. You know, it's maybe the eclipse is going to happen or something. But how are you guys doing?
We're doing awesome.
Awesome. Happy to be on. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, hell yeah. It's about time, right?
It's about time. It's my pleasure. Seriously. So for anyone that lives under a rock that doesn't know who you guys are, tell us. And this is like the best. This is the only time that I can be like, oh, this is an actual hero story, because I'm talking to superheroes. What is your hero story?
Okay. So mine would be, you know, I grew up not very privileged is a good way to put that. I can't say poor, because I mean, poor is relative. At the same time, not very privileged. I was very sheltered, grew up in a very strict religious background. I didn't have any freedom whatsoever. I think I spent probably 80 to 90% of my up until high school life grounded. So it was pretty fun. Yeah, I was the oldest, obviously, so I was the test baby as well. But I decided to go to the Marine Corps, and in the Marine Corps, I had a realization of they did fitness all wrong, and I needed to figure out something to do it right. Because, you know, when I was 10 years old, I actually grabbed a dumbbell and a Flex magazine, and I wanted to see veins in my arms. That was my whole goal, my forearms. So I did wrist curls forever, and slowly moved into bicep curls. And I had one 10-pound weight. I didn't even have two. So I just, you know, made do with what I could. And I remember, like, I was curling it, and at the point I could get like 12, and I gave it to my dad. I was like, how much can you do? And he just sat there for like 50 and made me look stupid, you know, because it's 10 pounds. And, you know, he was just like laughing at me. I'm like, what? But, you know, transitioning into that, learning how to do things correctly. I learned from Larry Scott, who was actually the first Mr. Olympia. And he learned from a brilliant individual named Vince Gironda back in the day, who was actually kind of preaching the ketogenic diet for bodybuilders, either bulking or cutting seasons. And, you know, I followed fitness. I got into the bodybuilding world. I was very vain about it. That was a big thing, is I just wanted to be a professional bodybuilder. I was very selfish. My first bodybuilding show, I ended up taking too many diuretics, because that's what you do. You get on stage to get dry. And I ended up in the emergency room at a blood potassium level of 1.3. And yeah, and you know what that is. And then, you know, the doctors were like, 2 hours later, we couldn't have brought you back. Your heart would have stopped if you wouldn't have come in here. So at that moment, I had this transition of like, that's your precipice of what do you choose? Do you become the bad guy or the good guy? And at that point, I switched everything into looking at the brain, looking at internal health versus looking how to optimize the external system and looking how to look good. I mean, it was vanity went out the window. Obviously, I still care what I look like, but it's more of a health perspective, not how lean and shredded can I look, because that's not healthy. So after the emergency room experience, I kind of created the superhero maker and moved away from bodybuilding. I started training fighters and athletes, because the fighters were, in a sense, a perfect blueprint for me to apply anything that I needed to do, because they weren't following anything, but they would follow anything. So they didn't have any structure, but they wanted it. And as soon as you gave it to them, they were stuck to it like glue. So I was able to give them, you know, put them on the ketogenic diet, especially a guy named Josh Tyler. We worked very close together. A couple other guys too. Sean O'Connell fought in the UFC a few times. A couple other local fighters out here, but we really got them into keto. And, you know, I was one of the first ones to actually show that ketosis could actually perform in a very high intensity state like MMA. bar none, is probably the highest intensity state you can possibly get your hands on. So, that was my realm. I obviously did it on myself, saw my performance go up first, and then started creating that. And that's why I just called myself the superhero maker, because I'm taking these fighters that are either pros or not, and I'm completely untapping their mental, spiritual, and physical so they can completely dominate all aspects of life instead of just be career focused.
Wow. And what about you, Tara? You complete the dynamic duo.
So I had a little bit of my own journey. When I was a little kid, I was kind of chubby, right? So weight has always been an issue for me. I remember in high school, I'm eating taking the top piece of bread off my sandwich and drinking my skim milk while my friends are all having Reese's peanut butter cups and Cokes for lunch, and I was just like, dang it, why are you so skinny? And so it was always something on my mind. My mom was a collegiate, nationally ranked track athlete and went to the Olympic trials and things like that. So we kind of grew up going to the track with her, but I always, kind of favored a very low intensity exercise, as I think a lot of people do when they start trying to get in shape. So I started marathoning and doing your typical group fitness classes and things like that. And my body never really changed. I could run marathons all day long, but I got no real aesthetic benefits from it. Right. And then about 3 years ago, I joined a gym down the street from me that only had basically treadmills and weights. So out of necessity, with no group fitness classes or somebody to just tell me what to do, I had to put the work in and learn how to lift some weights, right? And as I started to go down that path, I found that it was this super fun rabbit hole that I just couldn't get enough of. So I started really researching lifting and following coaches and bodybuilders and following that approach. And as soon as I got the nutrition in, my body started changing rapidly, and I got really lean. I got down to about 10% body fat. And of course, everyone was like, what are you doing? And I was pretty happy and very empowered from that change that I had made. And so I decided that I wanted other women to be able to know what it feels like to be strong, because I really strongly believe that when you have your physical on point and you're feeling better about yourself and going through the day empowered, then your spiritual will start to be affected too. Now, that's when I decided to be a coach. And then I met Craig shortly after, and he introduced me to the ketogenic diet. Obviously, he was just like, this is the best thing. You need to try it, right? So I tried it. And I'm actually going to be speaking on a seminar tonight about this, because I think there are a lot of people that are already highly trained resistance athletes that kind of feel like you've got it figured out. You're lean and mean and shredded, but there's so much focus on the aesthetic that you don't focus on what's happening inside your body. And when I switched to ketosis, I kid you not, I feel like a different person than I was back then. A lot of that has to do with meditation and medicine work and just changing my paradigm on the way I think about things. But a lot of it also I know is the reduction of inflammation in my brain. I feel much more balanced throughout the day, and my energy never drops and crashes. And I just have a healthier attitude towards life. So going from where I started as a coach to where I am now, I feel like much more, I would say superhero status, maybe a little bit, because it's a healthier approach instead of just the grind, getting, as lean as possible at whatever cost.
I want to touch on a couple of things that you said. When you decided that, you have treadmills and weights, sometimes it's hard to convince women, especially when you have things like osteoporosis and osteopenia and things that there is actual research that says the only way to remineralize those bones is with strength training. And they'll look at you weird, and there's this barrier of entry that they don't want to look manly. Tara, speak to women out there. How do you convince women out there that they're not going to look like Craig?
Okay, so I'm so glad you asked that question, because that's something that I always want to tell women, because, as you can imagine, most of the clients I've had have told me that their goal is to be toned, not muscular. There's a magical thing called tone. You have tone in your body,
yeah,
and they just want that.
You just want to bring the tone out.
Yeah. So what I did personally, which was maybe a little different than most women, is I copied the guys. I was like, the guys know how to build muscle. I'm seeing these girls and they're doing these weird things with their glutes and bands and, things like that. But the guys are the ones that are walking around with muscle. So if I want even a little portion of the muscle that they have, I'm going to do what they're doing until I get it. I got off, bodybuilding.com, and I found coaches on T Nation and started following some of the, best 7 exercises for a killer back, like I started on those things and I really, really watched the videos. I listened to cues. I listened to different coaches explain how to do those lifts. And then I watched people like a weirdo, right? So I'd warm up and I would watch the most jacked people in the gym, how they did those exercises, right? And they were always guys, right? So I would just watch and just try to take in everything that they were doing. So creeping can actually be really beneficial in learning.
Don't make it obvious.
Yeah, you got angles, mirrors. You got to be sneaky about it.
I remember one time I was in Orlando and I see this jack dude, just huge dude, and he goes to the squat rack and then puts 245s, so in 135, and he starts doing push presses, Ripito style, just strict. And then he goes and puts 2 more, and then he goes and puts 2 more. He was doing 315 push presses. And I was like, no, this is not happening. And everyone was around just staring at this jacked dude just doing strict presses like that. I was like, this is not happening.
So I did those yesterday with the bar.
That is my weakest. And that's probably why I remember, because that's my weakest lift. I can get my squat pretty high. I can get my dead pretty high. But my push press, man, it's just so difficult.
How big was it?
400 pounds, just like
shredded, like a strong man,
shredded, just huge. Yeah. But you see these people walking around, and you're like, oh, he's just gonna go do curls on the squat rack. No, that dude has been training for a very long time, seriously, and he probably knows more about weightlifting than the whole gym combined right now.
Maybe. There are some genetic freaks out there, and genetic freaks okay, so I'll take you to genetic freaks right now. Ronnie Coleman, he's 8-time Mr. Olympia. He's a huge dude, 300 pounds on stage. So he's having severe problems right now because pretty much all he did was extremely crazy, high intensity lifting, which you can't really do if you're a normal human being and see sustainable progress. But his bone density is shot because he did nothing, no eating greens. I don't think he ate greens for 10 years. I'm just trying to put that out there. Don't always go to the biggest guy in the gym. Go to the biggest guy at the gym with a massive grain of salt.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
And I'll say one thing that we talked about at the MI40 muscle camp that we attended in Tampa a couple weeks ago was, everyone's like, lift heavy, lift heavy, lift heavy. That is important, but only lift as heavy as you can while properly executing the exercise. And that is probably one of the biggest mistakes you see people do. It's like, wow, that's really cool that you lifted 400-pound deadlift with your back. That's not impressive. What's impressive is, today Craig was doing deadlifts, and I will say, Craig has probably one of the most impressive deadlifts I've ever seen. And you were doing 335, right? And Craig's a big guy, right? So sometimes you see guys that are in there, they're about 170 pounds and they're trying to do 400, 500-pound deadlifts and
130-pound dumbbell
press. And I
press.
like that they're pushing limits, but don't push them past your own capability of executing.
So a big thing that I'll do when I get fighters in is everyone thinks, okay, you're going to get a fighter in, you're going to create a lot of strength and a lot of go, 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 which is exactly the opposite of what I do, because most of the fighters will come from a go, 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 go perspective. And so I need to sit back and I need to really fine tune execution, because the workout is the symphony of the reps, right? Each rep is one of the instruments. And if you don't have each rep is right, then the workout fails, or it sounds like shit, in other words, if we're talking about music, right? So as long as you can get those dialed in, then you're going to be on point.
And the technique is so important because there's so many hacks, like for example, you can inject testosterone. Your muscles are going to grow faster than your tendons and your connective tissue and everything. You're going to have nice big muscles that are going to break your joints because your joints have not adapted to the level of the muscle.
Well, and the training stimulus needed is quite different too, because you actually need to go more neurological to create more tendon and ligament strength. But most people are stuck in 15 to 25, booty pump reps, which isn't going to build anything for you to handle that kind of muscle. So again, it's like you can take testosterone and get bigger muscles, but are you training the latter to help as well? Right. And again, as you know, if you're taking testosterone, you should probably be taking other things to help improve joint function and cognition, and then reduce some inflammation and estrogen.
And do the neurological training. So when you're off of it, you didn't just hack yourself into looking good without any functionality.
Yes. Right. You actually created new patterns in your system that'll take place and work day to day.
Absolutely.
So do you guys have a litmus test on how to go to T Nation and or all this Reddit and all these different places? How do you guys figure out, okay, this guy is full of shit, oh, this guy is actually pretty knowledgeable?
Okay, I'm glad you brought us back to that point, because I wish that when I was starting I had Craig, right? I had somebody who sifted through all the the crappy advice to give the solid stuff. So I'll give you maybe a little rundown of coaches that I would follow. One, obviously Craig, very knowledgeable, put the work in. And as a general rule, follow the coaches who are already pretty high level and are still hungry for knowledge. So if they're still putting out things that they learned at a seminar or that they read, and they're still trying to get educated, those are the kind of coaches you want to follow. Because the worst coaches to me, whether it's nutrition or training, are the ones that say, I have a master's degree in physiology or nutrition, and so I know what I'm talking about,
And on the latter side of that, the Instagram models that have genetics that don't know what it is to work.
We all know that one.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I got to put it out there, though, because people are going to be like, oh, that guy's shredded, I want to buy his program. But at the same time, like, if you run through an Instagram page or a website or a Facebook page where all they do is promote themselves and how they look versus promote their program and promote knowledge and education, that's a good sign to turn around. Yeah. Because it's cookie cutter, and you can find it for free on T Nation or any other, like ketogenic.com or bodybuilding.com. You can find all that for free. You never have to pay for one of those programs because they are all the same. Now, what you want to do is, like, going back to what she was saying, is another one would be Cassim Hansen. He's Cassim Hansen Muscle Expert on Instagram and Facebook. He is probably, in my opinion right now, the leading coach on muscle building, hypertrophy, neurological training, any kind of stimulus training, and then as well as genetic testing and supplementation to further that. He is what's called a pattern assimilator, and so he will pick and pull different pieces from, let's say an expert is so focused on one thing that he can't see around it. He has the ability to see it and kind of help the expert realize why that mechanism is happening. And so to have someone like that to listen to brings everything full circle, because then you can start pulling from other professionals and making sense of yourself through Cassim. So he's kind of the number one that I would filter through. Mm-hmm. And then you would look at like Ben Pakulski. He's actually one of the huge dudes we're talking about that knows what he's doing. He was recently a top 5 bodybuilder in the world. He actually just retired. Now he's losing 100 pounds of muscle. And so like following his journey is just phenomenal, learning how the body's going to work with that. Right. Then you have guys like have been in the field forever, like Charles Poliquin. I'm sure you've heard of him. Like, he is the strength sensei. That's what he is on Facebook and Instagram. He's got a company that he was part of that they kind of moved off called the Poliquin Group. The supplementation that he recommends is phenomenal. I actually learned to build my neurotropic compound from his information and my own practices. But then Charles Poliquin, and then obviously last but not least is our coach right now. We hired Christian Thibodeau. And so what Christian Thibodeau and Charles Poliquin are working on is neurotyping, right? So they have 5 different personality types that are going to mesh well with different workout variances. And so what we want to do is work with them to figure out, let's say, there's a type 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and a 3, right? Let's say you're a 1A, which is an athlete that's extremely gifted, very high dopamine, but you don't want to do a workout, right? So I need to provide new stimulus all the time for you to keep you entertained, and it has to be short, sweet, and out. Right? Let's say you're a level 3 who's very slow and controlled, very safe, won't really add 5 pounds. Then giving you a consistent program that you can follow for 4 to 6 weeks with very little variance is going to be really cool. So finding those little things is getting people to work out like they want to, which is going to fix the problem of burnout. And I hate this workout. I bought this program. I can't stick to it.
What I love about what Cassim and Christian bring to training is they don't speak in absolutes. Yes. It's not, this is the right way to work out. This is the right way to perform this exercise. It's, well, what's your intent? What's your goal? What are you trying to do? Okay, well then you can do it like this. Oh, so you have really high serotonin. You probably prefer to work out like this. You have really high dopamine. You're going to want to work out in a completely different way. And so there's no like right or wrong, and I think social media has kind of really made this impression of like, well, that chick is so fit or that guy's so fit and that's how he works out. That must be the best way. But it just depends. It depends on you. And I love that they're bringing that awareness.
You just said the magical words. It depends, because people want absolutes. People want, it's sexy to say, I have this pill that would cure everything. But in reality, everything is, it depends. It's a ketogenic diet for me. Well, it depends. And when you put that it depends out there, people just shut down and they don't want to listen to you because you're wishy-washy or whatever. But it takes, the people that know everything and have that have all the answers. Those are not the people that you want. You want the people that are like, well, it depends, and that's true learning through those individuals. That's when you like advance yourself.
Absolutely.
Beautiful put.
So I've heard a couple of rumors about keto. I guess keto is dying now, because it's the worst diet for women. So Tara, what do you have? Because as soon as you go keto, I think your thyroid falls off. But the ketogenic diet, it's so useful as therapeutic, as a way of living, as a way of training. But then you will hear practitioners out there saying, well, if you're a woman, maybe you don't want to do ketogenic diet. What have you guys discovered to avoid all the pitfalls of when you go super ketogenic and you might have those problems?
So now we have something called the Ketogenic Bible that was just released by Dr. Wilson and Dr. Lowry out in Tampa, and that is A to Z, cover to cover, the most finite, in-depth, easy to read piece of material you can get on ketosis. I cannot rave enough about how awesome
they nailed it. Like, even for somebody like Craig, who his life is ketosis, to somebody one of my clients who might be new to ketosis, it's going to be enjoyable, informative for everyone. They nailed it on that.
Yeah, so, and the whole thyroid thing, I mean, come on. It's okay. Thyroid comes down to chronic stress, under eating, and overdoing, right? And most people that we see thyroid issues, you got to look at the extreme cases, which you can look at figure and bodybuilding competitors. They're doing way too much, eating way too little, and not sleeping enough or meditating. And so at that point, your thyroid is going to freak out. But another thing, too, is like when a lot of people start going on keto, they see their thyroid function go down, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It might mean you're actually more sensitive to the thyroid hormone, so therefore you don't need as much, just like insulin and glucose sensitivity, right? So that's the key there is like as you're losing weight, your body is clearly more efficient because it's burning less reactive oxygen species, has a premium fuel to the brain. Once you're keto adapted, the inflammation rates stay very low as long as your salt is up, right? Because if you don't hydrate and drink salt, then keto can be very acidic. But if you use your electrolytes through salt and you get a lot of water, it's the best alkalized diet for you. And so at that point, if you're eating that way and making sure you're following a well-formulated ketogenic diet that is tailored to your specific needs, because someone who's sedentary is going to need far less protein, more fat, and very little carbohydrates. But someone like myself, I'll regularly do 100 grams of carbohydrates from a glucose or a cyclodextrin. Tara will do 50 or 60 because we're high-end performing lean athletes. So that is the key in making sure that ketosis is going to work for you. Now, my opinion on ketosis is that everyone should do it for at least 6 months. That is my thing, is if you feel like shit, stick it out. I felt like shit the first 3 times because I failed to get in, but I stuck it out. And 5 years later, it's the best thing I've ever done. So at that point, it's just do it at least for the mental fortitude, at least kind of erase some of the programming that you have been programmed with from Ansel Keys and the whole carbohydrate conundrum. And so that's the big thing I want people to take away from keto is even if it doesn't work for you, just try it for 6 months. And if it doesn't work for you still, then fine. Then don't do it, right? Because if you don't want to eat bacon and butter and beef, then you should not do keto,
I would say for me too, I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast that I feel much more balanced as a person since starting the ketogenic diet, and ketosis does have a balancing effect on your neurotransmitter and hormone levels. Also, my body fat, I purposely made my body fat go up a little bit since starting keto, and so that helped as well. So I went from about 10 to now I'm about 15% body fat. And that's a much more healthy range for a woman. But for women who are trying to lose weight, if you want to see some really awesome examples of what it can do for you, there's a group on Facebook called Keto Gains. And that group has the most incredible transformation pictures I've ever seen in my life. And they just keep coming. Yep. And we're talking morbidly obese people that are now as fit as I am. It's just incredible.
Yep. Yeah, I just had Luis on my show a couple of weeks ago. That dude is brilliant. One of the greatest things that that he has put out there, I think, is the mantra of chase results, do not chase ketones. And I think when anything becomes a little bit popular, and it's right on the name, and it's keto, and now we have a way of quantifying ketosis, and then you think the more ketones you have, the healthier you are, which is not, ketosis is a product of metabolism. You're not getting ketosis into your system to lose weight. It's the product that is going to give you the results, not, now there are perfect examples and reasons on why to use exogenous ketones. So can you guys talk a little bit about that? Because, I want to clarify this. I'm not saying that exogenous ketones are not useful. It's just that they have to be used with great respect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like they're, in a sense, the easiest way to look at ketones is they're a better source of carbohydrates if you're on a carbohydrate diet. Right? That's the easiest way to look at it. Cognition-wise, whether you're in a carbohydrate or a keto diet doesn't matter. It's going to give you a massive boost in cognition no matter when or why or how you take it. Massive. And it's shown everywhere. All my athletes are feeling 10 times better at the end of 3 or 4 or 5 rounds than they ever did without. Another thing, too, is we recently listened to Dominic D'Agostino's podcast with Joe Rogan, and he said that they've started seeing studies that each millimolar increase is a 10% increase in brain function because it stores more energy in the brain. So in a sense of chasing ketones, it depends. What is your goal? Are you losing weight? That's not your goal, is to chase ketones. Now, do you want to perform like a badass cognitively? Then yeah, you want to chase ketones, right? So again, it all depends on what the goal is, like we talked about. But that's when I would use exogenous ketones, is either a meal replacement because it doesn't require insulin and it's no glucose and it simulates a fasted state. And so you get that benefit. You get no hunger until 1 or 2 o'clock. You get a huge energy bump that isn't synthetic. And you go about your day a lot better with your mood because ketones are very GABAergic, and so they're going to increase the ability to focus under pressure and not stress out so much. And so that's why I put them in Lucid. My cognitive supplement is because I feel that their sole purpose should be used for the brain. And I feel that is the best way to do it, because it was funny when I had my neurotropics before ketones were out, they were good. But then I added ketones and it was just like a rocket ship to my brain. So that's why I was like, yep, I'm definitely going with these because it was so different and noticeable.
And on top of that, there's a couple of fat-soluble nootropics. It's like eating a salad. The reason we eat salads with an oily vinaigrette is because there are fat-soluble things that we need to absorb. If you are avoiding fats completely and you eat just greens, a bag of kale is less nutritious than a bag of kale plus a little bit of olive oil.
Yep. Hell yeah. I love that you brought that up. That's so beautiful.
I was telling Craig yesterday, when you start learning about fat and how it affects just even on the cellular level, if you think of fat is kind of, it's kind of greasy and slippery and everything moves around really well, right? And carbs are very, the sugar, glucose, very sticky, and so if you think about just everything inside your body, when it's pumped up nicely with the fat that you need, everything's just going to move nicer. And you'll notice that almost instantly with your digestion when you, sorry, poop talk, but when you switch to keto, you're like, wow, everything's, kind of moving a lot faster through here, and you notice that your body's becoming more efficient. And then on top of it, people will talk about, ketones for fat loss or whatever. And obviously it's not like you drink ketones and you lose a pound of fat like that. It's not what happens, right? But that being said, I don't eat a lot at night, right? So when I wake up in the morning, I'm kind of hungry, but I'll have coffee with ketones, and that combination, or even just ketones before my workout, I'm not hungry until the afternoon, right? Because my brain says, you got ketones, you're good, whereas if you're in a glucose diet and you wake up in the morning, your brain is just saying, give me some glucose to operate. But when you have ketones in there, your brain's like, I'm fine, you're good, calm down, go about your business.
And so that's what we're talking about. Aside from the cognition thing, the metabolic output that you're going to get is going to facilitate fat loss if you're in a caloric deficit. So Jake and Ryan Dr. Wilson and Ryan also showed a study that if you ate at maintenance, you could lose fat and put on muscle at the same time. But maintenance is a very hard number to hit every day.
Well, especially when it's changing every day, because if you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to gain weight, you have to every day change your maintenance level.
Yeah. because I mean, right now I track through the Whoop strap, right, which is an activity tracker, sleep tracker, all that stuff. And like my caloric burn yesterday was like 4,200, and the day before that it was 3,300, and the day before that was 5,500. And so like I would constantly be having to vary my, and that's hard to do. So at the same time, stay in a deficit and then refeed like once a week, right? So on the note, I'm going to kind of sidetrack a little bit. When you're in ketosis, once you've been in for 6 months, it's important to go out because we're dual fuel humans. We're supposed to be able to switch back and forth between carbs and fats for fuel. So you don't want to lose that ability. So bumping out every week around a workout or for dinner, if you killed a good workout, is going to maximize glucose utilization, not necessarily create a massive insulin response.
Like for example, if you're supplementing with creatine, you want to have a little bit of insulin response in order for the creatine to go to the right places. But on that note, so let's say we want to carb load. Should we go out and get some Oreos, or what should we do for carb loading?
Glucose. You want to stay away from fructose, right? The worst thing you can do is eat fructose and glucose, because then your liver is going to fill up and you're literally just storing fat.
Yeah.
Like that's the big thing is everyone wants to have berries with their cobbler. It's not a good idea. You know what I mean? It's or berries with their cookies and stuff like that. That combination is not great. Apple pie. Yeah. You want to stick to sweet potatoes and, use a sweetener instead of sugar. Stuff like that.
Do you do any white rice?
Jasmine rice is what I would recommend. I don't do it personally. I actually like to use a powder because I'm all about performance. I'll either eat sweet potatoes or use a cyclodextrin, which is enough. It's carbs, it's very slow digestion, doesn't cause an insulin response. And so I get all the glucose uptake in the muscles because I'm always glucose sensitive because I'm always working out.
What about like beans? Do you guys do any beans?
Absolutely. Yes. Beans are, they're pretty, like half a cup a day it's going to keep you in keto anybody. Like they're so negligible.
So, I'm going to do a personal question. Any supplementation that you guys, so I have an ebook on like the top natural supplements for your medicine cabinet. And it's more like, like if you get a cough, there's an amazing paper where you can use honey and coffee and it works better than dexamethasone. Like double-blind placebo-controlled trial where
That's great to know.
It's amazing, So I went through the literature and tried to look at natural supplements if you have like an oh shit moment, any supplements that you guys take that are you're like this is a game changer.
Honestly, my product. I don't want to like be, but that's why I created it. It was for me. Right. And it was the game changer. It literally, I'll call it pulling you out of the matrix. It's what it does. I don't know if you talked about microdosed LSD yet, but the neuroplasticity effect that you get from it is supreme. And so I've tried to mimic that with Lucid, and it has oxiracetam and aniracetam, which is a fat-soluble neurotropic, plus neuropeptin alpha GPC. So it pretty much just feathers all your neurotransmitters wonderfully for you to just uptake and relay information wonderfully. And that, honestly, has been the best product I've ever added to my arsenal other than ketones. So like that, and then creating my own protein blends. And then there's also a protein called Nitor. I don't know if you've heard about it yet, but it's kind of revolutionary in the fact that it's mimicked, the amino acid complex is mimicked to your DNA in a sense, instead of human DNA, right? So it's easier absorbed and actually going to fit in the right places versus kind of just, I'm going to grab a handful of protein and see what happens when you're taking anything else.
Two other products that we really like that I'd recommend for anyone, especially if you're in keto, is a greens powder. We like one called Nutriden, I think.
Yeah.
And DYN. Really like that. When you're in keto, I just noticed that you tend to get less of your micronutrients. A lot of people kind of slide on the leafy greens and, plus you're not eating fruit, right? So you're not getting
those colorful phytochemicals.
Yeah. So a greens powder is super helpful on that. Charles Poliquin has one too, Wellness Greens, and we've liked both of those. And then the other product that I would really recommend getting for everyone, especially if you're in keto, is an electrolyte powder. I thought because like we were like downing smart waters like crazy, right? It gets expensive after a while. So anyway, this is Centerplex Revive Electrolytes. And this is the first one we've tried, but I've been really happy with it. And this has helped my performance and just the way I've been feeling all day.
It replaces the electrolytes exactly how they get depleted in the amounts as well.
Yeah.
So it's the exact replacement that you need. And so, yeah, this was another thing that we got from Cassim Hansen again. So like all of these are coming from Cassim. And then another thing I would actually highly suggest doing is going to do your 23andMe and then plug that into Pure Genomics and get your DNA tested, because that's going to give you whether you're undermethylating, overmethylating a certain number of genes. And so you can actually find out what supplements you need.
But, and at some point, you just have to be like, fuck this, I need a practitioner. Yeah. And that's when you go call the superhero makers if you want to become a superhero, because now we just listed a bunch of supplements. Now we're talking about like looking at your DNA, and it can get pretty damn overwhelming, especially if you have a full-time job, especially if you have been sick for so long and you don't have the answers. The fastest way to get healthy is if you have someone from the outside looking in, and they can guide you, and then pay attention to them.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Craig was just saying the other day that like a quality of successful people is that they pay for someone to clean their house and they
order takeout more,
right? So our thing is like, there's lots of things that you can be good at, but like be good at your thing, right? And then pay other people to do the other things so that you can have more time being good at what you're good at. So if you're an attorney, and you don't have time to sit here and research nutrition forever, then yeah, pay somebody to just really quick interpret it for you and say, you need to take this, and this, and then you're good to go.
Well, I mean, like, we're coaches and we still do that.
And you have a coach.
Yeah, we have a coach. We just got back from 2 weeks of learning Low Carb USA and MI40. So it's like we still have that. And it's so essential to have, because in this industry with nutrition, fitness, health, trying to get healthy, if you're not researching and kind of redoing things every 3 to 6 months, you're falling way behind. And so another thing too is like my favorite way to research is when I take a shit, man. You just take your cell phone in there, read a couple studies, no one bothers you, it's kind of peaceful, you don't rush, and it's good to go. And you retain everything for some reason. I mean, things happen on the throne, right? So
okay, so now we're talking about poop. Do you guys examine your poop and make sure that you guys are digesting everything right? And have you guys got into that level?
Yeah. We're going to do some fecal samples, send them in, and get them analyzed. But yeah,
if you're into poop studies, Sean Wells, follow some of the stuff that Sean Wells has put out. He's looking into fecal transplants. It's actually really fascinating.
So another thing that I've heard on the streets about keto is that, okay, yeah, you will lose weight and you're going to look hot, but you can't perform.
Yeah.
Now, before you answer, okay, so I was reading Wired to Eat. And towards the end, my dear friend Rob Wolf says, now keto is very useful, but there's some people that have a decrease in performance. Unless you're talking about Craig Preisendorf, he name drops you on the fucking book. And I'm like, I know this guy. I know both guys. I know Rob and I know Craig. So tell us, how do you achieve, you're training MMA fighters, like you said, probably the highest level of performance. How do you prevent this drop off in energy expenditure?
Okay, so it comes to this, so the pattern assimilation thing again, right? So it comes to people are looking at one thing too much. They're looking at keto, as in like 75% fat, 5% carbs, 25% protein. That's 20% protein. That's all they're looking at it as. Like real keto, like Dominic D'Agostino, like modified keto for myself, I'm like 60% fat, 40% protein, 10% carbs, right? So I'm getting 50 to 75 grams of carbs minimum daily to support any kind of glucose needs, regardless if I'm in keto or not. Then exogenous ketones, again, are the game changer. Like it's giving your body the fuel it needs in massive amounts so it can perform with them. And when you get an overload like that, I never see a drop off. And the thing is, like, this is with MMA fighters. If we're not seeing, even if we see a 1% power drop off, if you're Daniel Cormier or John Jones, it could play a factor. But if you're the average person lifting weights, that doesn't fucking matter. You're not setting 1 rep maxes. You're not sprinting for the gold medal. You're just lifting fucking weights. And so stop doing that shit. That's what drives me the most crazy, is when they're just riding on that, but you're not the 1%, and that 1%, 2%, 5% doesn't matter for you to get results.
Can I talk also about Leslie Hoffheims? Let's talk about Leslie. So Leslie is a strong woman and total badass. And probably about a month ago, Keto Blueprint, we had a seminar, and she messaged us and said, hey, can you guys bring your ketone blood test meter? Like I've been in keto pretty very strictly for the last few weeks, and I want to see where I'm at. So I brought it, and we tested right before, and she was like over 2. She was like 2 point something, right? Which is really good. You know, you can tell that she's definitely been staying in keto. And as soon as the reading came up, she was just like, I knew it, because I've been lifting heavier. I could like go and go and go and never stop. Like she said she worked out for 5 hours that day. 5 hours.
Yeah, there's a drop off in performance for you.
So, anyway,
you need carbs.
she was loving the energy from keto. And Craig's have powerlifters and ketosis set records and things like that. So it's just amazing.
Yeah. You know, I love what you said. You know, once you get to the elite level of anything you do,
yes,
it doesn't matter. And you know, Tim Ferriss talks about this. In order to, you know, be able to have a conversation with another person in a different language, you only need like 75% understanding of that new language. If you want to be a doctorate of that language, okay, yeah, but that 15-25%, it's so much harder to achieve than the low-lying fruit, that's 75%. We're not trying to be Cormier. We're not trying to be Bones. You know, we're trying to look good, be healthy, and have that mental clarity. 1% doesn't matter.
I love it.
Yeah. There it is.
Boom.
So let's talk a little bit about mental clarity. So tell me the connection between mental clarity and inflammation.
Oh, okay. So if you are too inflamed, you are pretty much glucose insensitive, right? You're not sensitive to glucose. That means you have way too much insulin in the system. Not enough glucose is getting put away. That's what's going on. So if you're inflamed, you can't process that glucose to the brain as efficiently as if you weren't. Plain and simple. So in a sense, if you're running on ketones, you don't have that problem. If you're dehydrated, it's interesting. If you're dehydrated in keto, you feel super brain foggy. If you're low on electrolytes, you feel super brain fog. Then if you do a salt shot and chug a liter of water, it's all of a sudden like you just burst through this HD screen, right? You can't notice that in carbs because in a sense you're used to running off a less than premium fuel source that is very inflammatory. And a lot of people, like, they haven't figured out, right? They're in shape or they're on the right path, and so they don't need to do anything different. If it's don't broke, don't fix it, right? But at the same time, it might not be broke, but can you optimize it? That's the question you want to ask. And so if you can start lowering inflammation by even taking ketones or getting into ketosis, you're going to have an unlimited fuel source, because as you age, get hit in the head, or become out of shape, inflamed for any reason, again, you lose the ability to process glucose. Type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's. So again, giving your body both sources to work with is going to be optimal.
I would say too, going back to what Dominic D'Agostino was saying about the cognition bump that you get for every millimole that you go up. If you've been in ketosis and you've had, and you you do something like a fast or a multiple day fast, you feel that. You start feeling like you're like this immortal being walking the earth because your cognition is so high. You know,
like a robot.
You're in a different reality almost, you know, and you can feel that. So if you haven't experienced that yet, you got to.
Yes.
You know, it's so funny because I do intermittent fasting almost every day. I can count in one hand how many times I had breakfast in the past 4 years of medical school. I have an advantage, not only time advantage because I don't have to make breakfast. I have an advantage because of that ketosis. You know, like my brain feels better when I'm a little bit starved. And I probably, you know, with school, you know, you cannot go to bed early, and like I did sacrifice my body this past 4 years, but I have the rest of my life, and becoming a doctor is a sacrifice, and I'm doing it for a greater cause. But now I'm off of school, and now I can concentrate and go back and try all of these hacks that like you said, if you wait 6 months, then you're behind. I love how you compared fuels, you know, like carbs versus ketones, because I've seen people that have a nice car, fancy car, and they pull up to the gas station and they say 10% ethanol. Well, no, that burns way hotter than 100% gasoline, and that's gonna burn my engine. So they'll go in to a gas station that doesn't have any ethanol in their fuel and use the highest octane because it is a denser fuel that's gonna run slower. Okay. And that's the same thing that we're doing when we go into ketosis. We don't want that 10% of fuel that is going to burn through mitochondria. We want that concentrated fuel sources that burn slow and steady.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful analogy.
So I love that. I use that all the time in terms of like, you're not going to put shitty gas in your Ferrari, right? I own a Nissan GTR and no way I'm putting shitty gas in there, because I felt what 93 octane feels like and I felt what 100 octane feels like, and boy, is it a fucking difference. And so at that point, you're not going to do that. Now, on that note, we have glucose still, right? So what is glucose? We've all seen Fast and the Furious, I think. So glucose is like NOS, all right? When you need to step on the gas, that's when glucose comes in. And so you can run off your premium fuel and then NOS boost when you need to race, and then back to premium fuel. That's the ideal state we want to be in. So I love that analogy.
Super excited to keep following you guys on social media. What are your handles? Where can people contact you if they want to become your clients?
So my personal Instagram account is probably an easy way to catch me, and I'm Lift and Run. So just the letter N between lift and run, because that's how I got my start, right? Lifting made my running better, and my running made my lifting better. So
how much running are you doing nowadays?
Well, I ran the Boston Marathon in April. That was a lifelong dream that I was able to achieve through resistance training. So that's why I started my Instagram. And that's why I started my whole fitness journey, because I was like, hey, runners, you don't have any asses. You need to get in the gym and get to work, right? It shaved off a half an hour off of my marathon time.
Wow. What was your time, if you don't mind me asking?
My qualifying time for Boston was 3:17. And when I got done, I felt amazing. It was incredible.
Where'd you qualify? I used to run long distance, and I never tried to qualify. I've never been fast, but I did a couple of races in Miami that were qualifiers. Where do you qualify for Boston?
I qualified for mine in the Utah Valley Marathon out here in Utah.
Oh man, yeah. Utah is like the mecca for keto. Everyone that's keto is in Utah.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's great to hear. Because before FitCon, that was not the case at all. We so far behind the curve in Utah when it comes to fitness and nutrition, it was ridiculous. So I was able to bring Dr. Wilson and Ryan Lowry out, and they actually presented their first keto study on how during 12 weeks, 12 versus 12, standard American versus keto actually put on just as much muscle but lost more fat in a 12-week study. So they presented that first there, which was fucking groundbreaking, because everybody in the world was like, you're going to lose muscle on keto. Because like everyone who goes low carb for 2 weeks loses water weight, which is lean mass, and they test their body fat. They're like, oh, I'm losing muscle. And you're like, no, you're not, you know? So it's just all these thoughts, theories, and honestly, a lot of experts are putting a lot of bullshit out there because one, they haven't tried it, and two, they're preaching against it, right? They're putting it as an absolute, which at the same time, like, we need those people out there so we can get mad, because we can't always be happy, right? But other than that, like,
and, you know, but to that point, if I have a person with 150 over, 98 blood pressure, and I put them on a keto diet and they're losing water weight, that blood pressure is going to drop. I'm saving their kidneys, so fuck them. If they don't understand the reasoning, because aldosterone is going to be sparing water, so if you can drop those water levels, even if it's water weight, and you're saving someone's kidneys so they don't have to go on dialysis, I don't care if they think I'm crazy. I'm saving lives.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, thank you. My mom's life was saved by keto. She's type 2 diabetic. Things were going really wrong, couple of strokes. Now she's in keto. She's lost 50 pounds and her cognition is way up. So,
so we have Lift and Run. What else?
Superhero Makers on Instagram is where you can reach both of us. And Craig and I are very interested in doing couples training. So if there are any couples out there, we feel really adamant about the fact that couples need to do this together and support each other. There's nothing that breaks my heart more than when a woman reaches out to me and she's so pumped about training, and then a couple days later she's like, oh, I talked to my husband or my friend, and sorry, we can't afford it right now. And that just drives me bonkers. Do it together. You gotta have that. It will bring you together. And then Craig is obviously the Superhero Maker, original, the original on Instagram, and then on Facebook we are the Superhero Makers.
Yep. And then you can find Instagram as Craig Kent. Or no, sorry, on Facebook is Craig Kent.
And my last name is Garrison, Tara Garrison on Facebook.
Yeah, you know what? We didn't even get to talk about movies that think that eating meat is bad. We didn't get to talk about, so many things. So I guess you guys are going to have to come back on the show, So maybe in 6 months or something, maybe we can open it on Facebook, get people to ask questions, and then I'll let you guys take over, and I'll just ask you the questions, and maybe we can provide some awesome information for anyone listening out there.
I love it.
We would love to.
Hell yeah, let's do that.
Thank you so much for giving me this hour of your time. I know you guys are super busy, and we're going to run into each other again, I'm sure.
Oh, you're going to be at Bulletproof?
I'm not going to be at Bulletproof. When is Bulletproof?
October
10th and 13th?
October 13th to 15th.
13th to 15th. You know Harry's a keynote, right?
Again?
He's the keynote.
No way. So, okay.
You gotta go.
let's rewind back. Talk about Utah being the mecca of keto. Okay, so we have Drew Manning, we have Craig Preisendorf, we have Tara Garrison now, Dr. Adelson. So, like, guys, come on. You know, like, you guys are taking all the cool stuff.
I'll also add Haloti Ngata to that list. Do you know who he is?
No.
Oh, yeah. So Halotingata. Yeah, he's a Super Bowl champ, Pro Bowler. He won the Super Bowls with the Ravens with Ray Lewis, and now he plays for the Detroit Lions, and he's in his 13th year as a defensive lineman. So, like, the average defensive lineman is like 3 to 5 being crazy. He's in his 13th, and his last year was all keto and his best year ever.
Wow.
Yep.
Go figure.
From you.
I'm going to have to bring Arizona up to speed.
Yes. Yep, let us know. We'll help you out.
Awesome, guys. You know, thank you for being on the show, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks for having us, brother.
Thanks.
Take it easy.
See ya.